This is the extended outlook for the Chucktown wind report, Friday, July the 3rd until Monday, July the 6th. So we have quite a bit to talk about today as we have a frontal boundary that is sort of pinched in between high pressures to the south and out over the Atlantic. So our Bermuda high is further removed to the east and to the north out this way. It's actually a little further off the map that you can't see, but it is providing a southerly synoptic flow. It is strong enough to be able to provide a healthy synoptic southerly flow up the coastline. Now we do also have our northeast Gulf of Mexico high pressure that is centered right about there. It is helping to keep that westerly flow going, as we've talked about before. That keeps the healthy convergence zone from sea breezing as the winds come up from the south and meet these westerlies that are aloft. It creates this convergence zone where thunderstorms develop. Now yesterday we saw thunderstorms develop earlier on around 12:30, 1 o'clock, and actually breach the coastline and then push offshore, where the sea breeze actually built back in again, and the thunderstorms came from the upstate and marched back through the area later on in the day, and some pretty violent thunderstorms came through. So we're looking at a very similar setup today with that. And when we look at this boundary placement, we have to really kind of get the bigger picture and look at all these high pressures to the north that are keeping this boundary strewn across the United States in an east-west fashion. Now this boundary sort of ripples in a wave-like fashion because we have this northeast Gulf of Mexico high pulling southerly winds up into the boundary from here and even over into westerly flows along this way. So when we have all these high pressures, we have northerly winds dropping down. That's keeping this boundary sort of locked in place. So today's setup for the thunderstorming activity may be a little stronger because this line of moisture and thunderstorms are just marching one after the other from the west to the east, and that can create what we call derechos. Derechos are fast-moving, very powerful, sometimes slow, long-lasting lines of thunderstorms that come through, and they're just sort of consecutive one after the other. So we're watching the northwest Georgia area today for development of some of these thunderstorms as they downslope from the Appalachian Mountains and actually head towards the coast. So we've got to really catch this area on radar today. Keep an eye on that. This morning early we're looking at a segment of a frontal boundary that is draped off of our coast. Pull away. We had some shower activity earlier. I think that's going to dry out, and we'll see some of those sea breezes as they develop as land heats. Should peel back some of those low-lying and mid-level clouds off the beach sometime later this morning. So when we look at the high pressure out in the Atlantic, this is about where it's centered. Now this is for the forecast for where it will be tomorrow, but that's about where it is today. You have the Azores here, and then you have Bermuda here. So this is more characteristic of a Bermuda Azores high. Now the strength of it's 1,028 millibars, which gives its reach a very far kind of location. Now the ridge axis of this high Florida, so that allows everything above it to sort of flow more freely and a little more stronger, especially up in the southeast North Carolina. Now as this high pressure sort of fades out to the east, we have to really watch this frontal boundary right here as it drapes along the northwest quadrant of that high pressure, because what it does is as it pushes into it, these isobars of the high pressure become a little more flattened, and what that does is it places that ridge axis over about Georgia, and eventually that ridge axis could meander north up into South Carolina, and so that will actually make the winds weaker. So that's how the ridge axis works on the high pressure. It's more of an extension of the center that goes out, extends further out away from the center of high pressure. So we have one thing to look for over Saturday, starting Saturday into Sunday and even into Monday, where our winds could weaken because the ridge axis falling over northern Florida and then maybe drifting up into Georgia and even into South Carolina, southern South Carolina if possible. Now if that ridge axis does stay south over northern Florida, we'll be okay. We'll hold our moderate builds each day off the sea breezes. So we'll have to kind of take it day to day with that. And this northeast Gulf high pressure will really be a key player in that, as it provides that westerly flow and sort of keeps that ridge axis on the clockwise rotation of it. Could keep that ridge axis a little bit further to our south. So that's how we got to kind of look at the weekend. Now it's iffy right now. I'm thinking we'll be able to stay 12 to 16 knots pretty much every single day with maybe some higher moderate builds. So let's take a quick look at our visible loop on satellite imagery. I'm going to stop it right there, and you can see the segment of frontal boundary right off of our coastline that was there this morning that allowed some of the showers to kind of pull through, and some residual shower activity along the tail end of it. As the sun is coming up and the land is heating, we should start to see those clouds peel back. Like I said earlier, the mid-level and low-level clouds will peel back away from the coast. It'll dry out, and we should see some abundance of sunshine, but we really do need to watch this area right up here, northwest Georgia, and even some of these areas developing as the day goes on across into South Carolina. Okay, so let's take a quick look at the water vapor imagery, and we can see a little bit of drying out the coastline. Most of the moisture at the surface and even up high is locked into this area in northwest Georgia. Okay, so if we look at the visible loop again from a regional aspect, I'm just going to kind of zoom in to our area, take a quick look at what's going on with the frontal activity. And there's that segment of frontal boundary right there that they're showing on, and I'm going to activate counties and check out where any watches or warnings are posted. And it looks like we got some severe thunderstorm watches posted all throughout the Midlands of South Carolina. Some of these other ones here in Georgia are probably a little more severe, so something to watch today. Definitely watch radar. Let's go ahead and take a look at the radar while we're talking about it. And we're seeing a lot of those storms or rains and showers have pushed off the coastline. And I'm going to activate the editing tools here. So this area of storming and showers has pushed off the coastline, and we're watching this area right here. So if we push play on that, I'm going to get that moving again on radar. You can see the consecutive storms one after the other. This is sort of the beginnings of what we could call a derecho. Although it looks like these are starting to dissipate, they could fire back up again as the sun heats up the land more throughout the day. So I'm going to take a quick look at, that's the 124 nautical range. I'm going to go base reflectivity up to 248 and look around. Okay, so here's the storms. Looks like some storms are firing back up over here on going towards Atlanta. So again, watch radar today. It's going to be very important. Looking at the mesoscale analysis for the area, we can see quite a bit of moisture storms again following just south of the boundary. Looks like Charleston's drying out. Some of these flagstaffs are showing some 15 to 20 knot winds along the barbs, and if we take a quick look at Charleston, we're seeing a southwest flow. We're actually seeing a pretty healthy flow, 14 to 17 knots. So it looks like we have a pretty healthy gradient in the area, and I'll come back to this in just a moment. I want to go ahead and go to the earth.nullschool.net map and take a quick look at the surface high pressure that we see over in the Bermuda Azores High. So here it is right here. You can see a giant clockwise rotation of this high pressure, and you can see where the synoptic southerly flow comes over all the way to the coastline. You can see the northeast Gulf of Mexico high, providing that westerly, sort of west-southwest nudging aloft from there. So let's take a quick look at Wind Alert FlowVis. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this map, but it's really neat. It's based off of the GFS map, and I'm going to do a quick rundown of the forecast for it. So I'm waiting for it to load here, if it will. Looks like it's stalling a little bit. Here we go. Okay, so sorry for the delay there. Okay, so we have 11 o'clock a.m. The forecast is such as this. Now, these deeper reds into maroons, oranges are some of the stronger wind speeds. These oranges are more moderate, and the reds are stronger. And we are definitely seeing a southwest flow along the coastline today. And as I said earlier, we're watching this area, so let's see what happens. I'm anticipating an upper level trough to sort of develop over that area later today as that boundary possibly surges down or sags down into the south, where it ripples in a wave-like fashion. So here we are at 2 p.m. It looks like the winds are going to start to pick up along our coastline, and that's where we start to see the more moderate flows. And then as we get into 5 p.m., you can see where we get borderline strong winds. So I'm anticipating these winds to come up somewhere between 15 to 19 knots today. Now, if we look over at Georgia, we can start to see a little bit of a crease develop. And let's take a look at 8 p.m. And here's the crease right here. Now, what this crease is that upper level trough I was talking about. And these are where thunderstorms are really going to start firing off later in the day. So even though we have a southerly flow along the coastline, we do at the surface these winds at the surface here represent what the thunderstorm area is going to be. So we have to really, again, we're going to be watching radar, and by 11 p.m. you can see some of that sort of disperse. Okay. All right, so let's take a quick look at the weather balloon soundings called Raywin sondes, and take a look at Charleston in particular. And it looks like we have a little bit of incomplete data for Charleston, but it gives us about half a picture of what we're looking at. So this morning, looks like we're working off a slight inversion. There was a nocturnal jet overnight that allowed winds to come up to moderate levels. Some mid and upper teens were showing, upper teens at Folly and some mid-teens at Isle of Palms. And those winds were more along a west-southwest flow, and they sort of backed down, and it looks like they're trying to rebuild on the sea breeze southwesterlies, and we'll get to the surface map here in just a moment. So the weather balloon readings showing some pretty solid westerly flow aloft up until about 20,000, maybe 22,000 feet, and this record is incomplete, but I would think that based on yesterday's weather balloon, that these westerly winds continue and maybe go towards more of a northwest up really high, around 24,000 feet. So we're looking at some pretty good westerly flow aloft to get those thunderstorm tops moving towards us, or more of a west-southwest flow actually from the west. Now let's go ahead, and I want to look at last night's. So this is the 7 p.m. weather balloon reading, and it's very similar. So we have this 20-knot westerly flow up until we get to the higher levels around 24,000 feet, and then it gets stronger. So we have 45 knots and 35 to 45 knots of more of a northwesterly flow pushing the cloud tops down. So we have westerly flow pushing the cloud tops across, and then that's what created that line of thunderstorms yesterday. It actually assisted those to really burn through the area. Okay, so let's take a quick look at Charleston. And right now we see 14 knots at the Isle of Palms Pier. And here is the current graph. I'm going to go ahead and select all models for the forecast for this afternoon. I think that we're going to be able to get about 15 to 19 knots. So these computer models are picking up on some things, but perhaps not picking up on some of the sea breeze nuances that happen. Now, we do have to keep an eye on these westerly winds that may continue to cut across the harbor and some of these open channels, because the sea breeze sometimes will struggle with that. And I'm going to blow that up just a little bit. Okay, so many of the models are hinting at a fairly moderate build today. Once again, sorry, that's a slow load on this one. And we can see the HRR model, 3 kilometer. It's a high resolution model. The AM5K, it's also a high resolution model. A little bit jumpy today, and that could just because they're picking up on thunderstorm activities to kind of traverse the area in and out. Models get a little bit jumpy when you start seeing a heavier profile for thunderstorm activity, and they tend to read things that may or may not happen, that sort of guesstimate where pockets of moisture may develop, or where some of the peak heating of the day may fire off thunderstorm tops and breach the coastline for this particular area. I would probably go with this line right here, the one that's just a little more steady, probably based off a lower resolution model, and it picks us all the way up to about 18, 19 knots. So that's about where I'm going to head today on this one. Now, as we go a little bit further out for Saturday, you can see the models drop off the winds, and that could be due to the ridging process that I was talking about earlier, where the high pressure out in the Atlantic, the Bermuda high, actually flattens out, and the ridge axis meanders a little bit further to the north, and you can see Sunday where that actually falls even further, and then even into Monday. So we'll have to really watch and see what this frontal boundary does to our north, to the high pressure out in the Atlantic for that profile. Okay, I'm going to back out. Let's see if we can get this minimized and talk about sea breeze. Okay, so yesterday we saw quite a bit of storming. Now, a lot of the storming developed in this area and then moved quickly offshore. It did provide some interesting clouds, some interesting frontal boundary activities. So today it's hard to say where these are going to form again, but there is abundant moisture over this land already from yesterday's storming, and there's abundant moisture over the islands, Sullivan's Island, Isle of Palms, and maybe even Morris Island, to help fuel some of that with leftover moisture, unless it's already dried up through the morning. So unless that happens today again, our sea breeze penetration should kick up into this area, and that's typically how the sea breeze does. It will penetrate land up into a certain point, and this will be your convergence zone where thunderstorms develop, or cloud tops will develop pretty high. Now those sweeping lines of thunderstorms from the west tend to sort of override those convergence zones no matter what. So if we get a strong storm setup, that convergence zone is going to be sort of ingested into that line of thunderstorms and swept right off the coastline. But we can see right now where the sea breeze front is right about here, simply because the winds are already southwest below, and then we have this westerly flow kicking in behind. So that may be the struggle through the day today, as the sea breeze tries to fight off these westerly winds. And that sort of happened yesterday until the first batch of storms went through and the sea breeze line was actually able to kick in all the way. So that will pretty much do it for the extended outlook for the Chucktown wind report. We'll take a quick look at the tropics. There's really nothing going on in the Gulf. High pressure is dominating over the Gulf. I did want to run the Saharan air layer just to give you an idea of what's going on now. The convergence zone, intertropical convergence zone, is right down in this area, and that's about where it should be this time of the year. It's further south, and as we get into late July and into August, this intertropical convergence zone will drift to the north, and that's where we get into the Cape Verde season. Now the Cape Verdes are right here. So when let me map. So intertropical convergence zone is here, and this will drift to the north where we get into the Cape Verde season. And that just allows a little bit more building pattern as the area of development expands, and it actually increases the moisture content for the belt of moisture that's coming off the African coast. So one thing we look for is the Saharan air layer, and all these deep reds that you see on the map are basically desert sands and dust that are kicked up into the mid-levels of the atmosphere from Africa. So this is being west coast of Africa. There's lots of sort of cliffs and mountaintops and everything in these valleys that kind of scoop down into the ocean, where these sands and desert dusts get kicked up into the air. Now if we run the model for it, you can see how it sort of pulses in and out with these dusts. Now that layer, the Saharan air layer is what it's called, is what keeps this area of convergence from being able to develop any kind of tropical system. So we see many systems spin off the coast of Africa, but they're not allowed to develop because that dust up high is actually a stable atmosphere, and it gets wrapped up into these clouds, and they don't allow for thunderstorm or higher vertical stacking to sort of develop with them. So not expecting anything over the next week or two from the tropics, just because the Saharan air layer is so strong this time of the year, and the intertropical convergence zone is too far to the south. So not much going on there. So as a quick recap, I'm going to go with the winds today, 15 to 19 knots. I think that we'll have a strong enough sea breeze front this afternoon to be able to provide a healthier abundance of sunshine along the coast. And then with all this inland troughing and some strong breeze going, now that could be compromised by some earlier breaching of the coast by some thunderstorms, but should be able to build back. And later on in the day, we're going to have to really buckle down and watch radar for this batch of rain and showers to develop and intensify nature, and then traverse the coastline, in which that would completely kill off the winds, cause some shiftiness and gustiness. So that will be it for the extended Chucktown wind report, and have a great 4th of July weekend.